Mr. Speaker, sir, at the outset, I wish to highlight that as Leader of the House, I gave immediate attention to the motion of no confidence presented by the Leader of the Opposition. Only a few days after the motion was submitted to the Clerk of the National Assembly, it has appeared, at my request, on the parliamentary agenda for consideration and debates. This is testimony to our firm belief on this side of the House in parliamentary democracy. And this contrasts with the undemocratic doing of the Labour government in 2014, which, in collusion with the then MMM opposition, deliberately closed the National Assembly for almost 9 months to concoct a political alliance to cater for the personal and selfish interests of their respective leaders. And I will come back later to that episode, lorsque notre démocratie parlementaire fut assassinée. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to add that we, on this side of the House, are totally at ease with our conscience, as we are dedicating every single minute of our mandate to work for the advancement of the country and the improvement of the quality of life of our population. Despite unprecedented, hard and challenging times, with the onslaught of the COVID-19, which is now being compounded by the negative impact of the war in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, sir, since 2020, with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the whole world has been shaken by an unprecedented socio-economic turmoil, putting at risk the health, jobs, and incomes of millions of people. And as at 11th of May 2022, more than 516 million people had been infected, and there had been more than 6.3 million deaths, according to the World Health Organization. The situation is even more dramatic as the figures that I have just mentioned exclude data from the African region. And I need not refer to the last comment that was made by the World Health Organization, stating that the number of deaths could be even more than the official figure that has been announced by themselves. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the Leader of the Opposition, I believe, will have time to sum up. And just as he wouldn't like to be interrupted, I also would not like to be interrupted. So I seek your protection, Mr. Speaker, sir. The International Labour Organization has estimated around 52 million fewer jobs in 2022 than at pre-COVID levels. 52 million fewer jobs. Global debt has risen to 256 trillion US dollars by the end of 2020. And according to UNCTAD, small island developing states experience an estimated fall in their GDP of 9% in 2020, compared with a 3.3% decline in other developing countries based on IMF projections data. As we know, Mr. Speaker, sir, the SIDS economies are highly dependent on tourism, and they have been even more affected, with their GDP falling by more than 12%. That is, in summary, how the world socio-economic order has drastically changed with COVID-19. And as I said, presently, the turmoil has been exacerbated by the Ukrainian war. And Mauritius is, of course, no exception. Our economy has been badly hit. And our people, I have stated in numerous occasions, they are feeling the brunt of this unprecedented situation that no government since independence has had to face. But it appears that members of the opposition, they are really, in fact, living on another planet. They are either oblivious to, or they are trying to minimize the worldwide impacts of the war in Ukraine and its enormous human and economic consequences that continue to unfold. But we do not think that they are so naive as to maintain that a country with an open economy like ours could have shielded itself completely from the deleterious effects of such drastic global turmoil. It is clear, though, that they have a different agenda, which is to stir instability in the country by all means. And I say by all means. This is what we've been witnessing recently. The leader of the opposition said, "Never waste a good crisis." Several times he has been saying that. For him and his friends in the opposition, it means capitalizing on the present crisis to push forward their own sinister agenda. And this motion of no confidence, in fact, betrays their bad faith and exposes their real motives. In their desperate attempts to discredit and destabilize the government, they are deliberately instigating people to take to the streets. Because we see repeatedly what they are saying. Look what is happening in Sri Lanka. And I know, I don't know if the Honorable Leader of the Opposition is aware. I know what is being said in some private meetings. I must say, I think I'm quite well informed of some people, some members of the opposition, telling people, I will tell you, if you want, I can tell you, in private I can tell you. Yes, don't want to mention names in the House, but there are some people, some members of the opposition, who've been saying on several occasions, trying to incite people to go and create disorder. I remember very well when there was the lockdown, how some members were trying to instigate people to go and to break in supermarkets and shops. One member even had put on the social media a video to say that a member of the Labour Party was saying, look, the Prime Minister, Pravind Jugnauth, he has food, plenty of food at his place. But we don't have any food. And what do you want me to do? What do you want us to do? I don't want to go into all these examples of how, when we are facing a double crisis, some people want to surf on that double crisis, to create havoc, and to create disorder, and to try to destabilize our institutions and the government. We have seen how some members of the opposition, I'm talking about not only members of the National Assembly, but other frontline members, I would call them frontline members of their own party, of their respective party, supporting publicly the mob that acted violently in Port Louis on the night of 22nd and 23rd of April of this year. They are trying to play cheap politics on the back of a world phenomenon that has taken all countries by bitter surprise. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, sir, for our country and our people, they are failing in their disgraceful attempts, as this government has proved that it can and is dealing with these imposed and daunting challenges with courage, compassion, and proactive decisions, acknowledged by a majority of our population. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the face of the global crisis, we have managed in Mauritius to weather the COVID-19 storm successfully, both on the health and the socio-economic fronts. We are also doing our best to shield our people and our economy from the consequences of the Ukrainian war. I must say we have no visibility. What is going to happen in the future? Tensions which are even growing with certain speeches from people who are leaders of their countries who are directly involved in this conflict. What awaits us in the near future? Time only will tell. How we are going to face a situation where there is major disruption in the production of basic commodities. We are talking about rising prices. There is a real risk that there is a shortage of commodities on the world market. And the opposition doesn't see that. And as I say, it is not government that is saying that. International organizations, if I can take for our response to the COVID-19 shock, have commended us on the effectiveness of our response. We were praised, Mr. Speaker, sir, by the World Bank for our health response to the pandemic and to the measures that we have taken to keep households and companies afloat, protect jobs and incomes, and shield the economy from a collapse. The World Bank commented that, and I quote, Mauritius responded to the COVID-19 shock with one of the largest support packages in the world as a share of GDP, unquote. The World Health Organization commended Mauritius for delivering a highly successful health response to COVID-19. BMG Global Health highlighted, and I quote, the COVID-19 response in Mauritius, which is viewed as a success story, benefited from strong leadership, highest political engagement, and strong involvement of the WHO, the private sector, and other key stakeholders, unquote. This is not the MSM. This is not any party who has a privileged relationship with these organizations. These are respected organizations. And these are their views. Mr. Speaker, sir, As I stated while answering the last P&Q of the Leader of the Opposition, since December 2014, when the electorate entrusted us with the responsibility to govern the country, we have been taking a multitude of decisions and measures to improve the purchasing power and the quality of life of the population. Our response to COVID-19 and to the adverse effects of the Ukrainian war has again been motivated by our political philosophy to put our people first by protecting lives and jobs and preventing closures of enterprises while giving special attention to the most vulnerable. The House will recall that I said we will do whatever it takes to help our people and businesses through this crisis. And we did just that with all the support and swift measures that we took. The safety net that we placed on businesses and the unprecedented offer of support that we have given to workers. We are pursuing our efforts along those same lines. Let me mention once again some of the measures taken by government since December 2014. Increase in basic retirement pension from 3,623 rupees to 9,000 rupees. Increase in other basic pensions, including invalidity pension. Introduction of the subsistence allowance scheme, whereby a subsistence allowance is paid on a monthly basis to families living in absolute poverty. This is the first time that such a measure is being implemented. Introduction of negative income tax. Again, a first time. Introduction of minimum salary, which now stands at 11,075 rupees. Grant of full yearly salary compensations from 2015 to 2022. Payment of PRB 2016 and PRB 2021. Maintaining free travel schemes for seniors and students. Subsidy on SC and HSE fees. Free tertiary education in public institutions. Subsidy on purchase of water tanks. 6 meter cube of water and wastewater charges free. And increased subsidies in rice, flour, and LPG. Mr. Speaker, sir, the grand total of the measures for the period December 2014 to June 2020 amounted to 112 billion rupees. This represented unprecedented additional revenue given to the Mauritian households. And never before in the history of our country has any government done so much to reduce inequality and promote inclusiveness. Mr. Speaker, sir, in addition to the measures that I've just mentioned, this government has taken numerous other initiatives targeted at our compatriots at the lower rungs of the ladder and who are more vulnerable in such exceptionally challenging times. Let me mention some of those initiatives. Implementation of the Marshall Plan Against Poverty as from the financial year 2016-2017. Additional support to SRM families in the field of education to the tune of 250 million rupees every financial year. For the current financial year, provision of 416.3 million rupees has been made in the budget of the Social Integration Division. From December 2016 to date, funds to the tune of some 400 million rupees have been disbursed under the Child Allowance Scheme. Distribution of food packs during COVID-19 lockdown, the introduction of the government wage assistance scheme, self-employed assistance scheme, and self-employed one-off grant. So far, under these schemes, some 27 billion rupees has been disbursed. The setting up of a COVID-19 Solidarity Fund, out of which 1.7 billion rupees have been disbursed. The grant of SME, interest-free loan from DBM, to help enterprises with turnover of up to 50 million rupees. Introduction of the 1 million SME COVID Special Support Scheme at an interest rate of 0.5%. And grant of subsidies of 1.35 billion rupees, including the additional 150 million rupees provided by government recently on food commodity items that most frequently consumed by Mauritian families. Mr. Speaker, sir, all these measures that I have re-emphasized upon are concrete and palpable. They have been gratefully acknowledged and appreciated by the population, and particularly by the less economically fortunate of our citizens. That counts the most for me and my government. Mr. Speaker, sir, some in the opposition, including the leader of the opposition and the former Prime Ministers, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam and Paul Béranger, have alluded that the Mauritian economy was already in the red before the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded. My answer to them is simply to remind them that in July 2020, Mauritius, under my leadership, had officially joined the ranks of high-income countries according to the World Bank. The World Bank added in its 2020 report on Mauritius entitled, "Through the Eye of a Perfect Storm, Coming Back Stronger from the COVID-19 Crisis," that, and I quote, "On July 1st, 2020, Mauritius officially joined the ranks of high-income countries. It is a cruel historical irony that Mauritius reached the high-income milestone during one of the worst years in its history. Mauritius delivered a highly successful health response to the global COVID-19 pandemic through a hard lockdown and subsequent quarantine measures, and as a result has effectively been COVID-free from April 2020 to March 2021, when a second outbreak occurred. Mauritius has so far been able to avoid the large-scale health crisis observed in many other countries. However, COVID-19 has caused severe economic disruptions in Mauritius," unquote. Moreover, we managed to bring down the unemployment rate to 6.7% in 2019. It is therefore clear, Mr. Speaker, sir, that prior to the outbreak of COVID-19, the Mauritian economy had grown steadily to reach the ultimate high-income milestone. But the economy suffered a major setback after the COVID-19 struck and, of course, has pulled us backward. It is appropriate to also mention that Mauritius has been ranked top in Africa in a number of world-recognized indicators, namely the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, the Global Competitiveness Index, the Mo Ibrahim Index of African Governance, the Forbes Survey of Best Countries for Business, the Social Progress Index, and most recently, the Chandler Institute's Good Governance Index. All All these recognitions prove that the socio-economic landscape of Mauritius is certainly not as gloomy as the opposition desperately wants people to believe. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition and other members have dared to say that this government is fleecing the people. This is, I must say, totally unfounded, as I proved earlier with facts and figures, testifying the multi-pronged support being given to the population, particularly to the most vulnerable. Some people might have forgotten that this country fell to the brink of havoc under the reign of the Labour Party and the PMSD during the 2005-2010 period. They pretended in those days, you will recall their slogan, to put people first. Instead, they put themselves first. And they delivered absolute poverty. For the first time in our country, we had a category to be named absolute poverty. Confronted with the financial crisis of 2008, which was nothing comparable to the COVID-19 crisis, they decided to align themselves with the economic elite and put the reform burden solely on the population. In fact, they were the ones who fleeced the population to the bones. I will recall to the House how they introduced the new taxes, like the national property tax, tax on interest, tax on cooperative societies, a levy on short message service, SMS. They abolished subsidies on SC and HSC examination fees. Can you imagine that? And this is the Labour Party. And a number of tax exemptions also, which they abolished. They even attempted to remove that piece of bread that was distributed to school children and abolish subsidies on rice and flour. And what, Mr. Speaker, sir, what was the budget at that time that was being spent on this bread? Huh? It's a shame. Prior to 2008, they deliberately depreciated the rupee by more than 20% to dope economic growth, as ascertained by many economists, in fact, including some who are very close to the Labour Party. And that resulted in commodity prices soaring to unbearable levels. And in those times, absolutely no support was given to the workers. Instead, workers were deprived of their dues in terms of salary compensation with the advent of the National Pay Council. You will recall what gimmick they had made of the National Pay Council. They came up with a formula which really, in fact, compensated workers below the rate of inflation. And to add insult to injury, the labor laws were amended to give the employers the right to fire upon their whims and caprices. All that misery was imposed on the population at a time when there was no COVID-like situation. We can imagine how the population would have been tortured had the then government been in power in the present unprecedented circumstances. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition and some members have tenuously dared to criticize the government had not adjusted the basic retirement pension to inflation. I don't know whom they want to convince or whom they want to mislead. We know that the basic retirement pension has been increased by 148.4% in the 2015 to 2019 period. This speaks of volumes of the attention and consideration that we have given to old age pensioners who are grateful to this government and condemn, I'm sure, the demagogy of the opposition. With regard to public debt, we all know that worldwide the recommended debt thresholds have gone bust in view of the massive financial resources that were deployed to respond to COVID-related social and economic crises. According to the World Economic Forum, Falling revenues combined with costly pandemic relief measures have increased global debt by 20 trillion US dollars since the third quarter of 2019. Japan's debt to GDP ratio increased to 257%, the highest of any advanced economy. Sudan's debt to GDP ratio increased to 210%, the highest for Africa. Singapore debt reached 138% of its GDP. France debt reached 116% of its GDP. Mozambique debt reached 134% of its GDP. Now you're comparing Maldives. I heard earlier somebody talking about Maldives. Look at Maldives. They are receiving so many tourists and so on. Maldives, 137%. Why don't you compare with Maldives now on the debt issue? Angola, 104%. And Zambia, 101%. For Mauritius, the public debt officially stood at 88.6% of GDP as at March 2022, as opposed, yes, to 65.5% in December 2019. The increase, of course, is mainly attributable to the massive funds that had to be disbursed by government to protect lives and livelihoods in the aftermath of COVID-19. Could we have done otherwise, Mr. Speaker, sir? Could other countries also have done otherwise? Is the opposition saying that we should have left the people to die and lose their jobs? Are they on the other side of the house saying we should have left enterprises to close business? Or were they waiting for havoc to strike the country so that they gain political mileage? Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also very concerned by the increase of public debt to GDP. The economic impact of the Ukrainian war is putting still more pressure on government finances. But we have pledged to bring public debt down over time, and that is a commitment that we will keep. Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition has also alleged that this government has wasted money in implementing, amongst others, they have mentioned the Safe City project, the Côte d'Or Sports Complex. I would say this is again plain demagogy. The Director of Audit in his last report has made it clear that, I quote, "The Safe City project infrastructure has helped the police service to resolve 254 cases during the period January 2019 to November 2021. The number of resolved cases was on increasing trend due to progress in installation of cameras," unquote. And that is why, when you see some members of the opposition who have been supporting those mobsters who have in fact damaged safe city cameras in certain regions, in certain parts of the island, knowing full well what they were doing in order that they could continue with the business of going against the law. The safe city cameras, Mr. Speaker, sir, have proven to be an effective deterrent for potential offenders and criminals. And the success of this project has been such that requests have been made by members of parliament of the opposition side for the installation of these cameras in their constituencies or in regions where they consider this to be necessary. As regards money spent in the Côte d'Or Sports Complex, it represents for us an investment in the youth of our country. We believe in the potential of our young people, and we have provided them with the state-of-the-art infrastructure for them to develop that potential fully and honor our flag in regional and international sports competition. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to cooking gas, we have always been conscious of the need for this product to remain affordable at all times. It is worth emphasizing that in March 2012, under a Labour PMSD government, the price of 12-kilo cylinder reached an unprecedented peak of 330 rupees. At that time, the purchasing price of a 12 kg cylinder on the international market was less than 600 rupees, whereas today we are purchasing at 662 rupees and consumers are buying at a retail price of 240 rupees. That proves we are still heavily subsidizing LPG and supporting households. It is worth mentioning for the attention of the demagogues that the MSM, I say the MSM-led government, decided to bring down the price of 12 kg cylinder to 270 rupees in August 2016, 240 rupees in June 2018, 210 rupees in June 2019, and 180 rupees in June 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, as for the prices of mogas and gas oil, recent increases were dictated by soaring import prices which have eroded the stabilization fund of the STC. Immediately after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the price of Brent on the international market started escalating to reach unprecedented heights in the first weeks of March 2022, resulting in the petroleum hub market being highly volatile and unpredictable. And as a responsible government, we could not fold our arms and leave the finances of the STC to deteriorate. Perhaps it would be appropriate also to remind the population that the Labour PMSD government did not hesitate to impose a levy of 3 rupees on each litre of mogas and gas oil after the STC registered losses to the tune of 5.4 billion rupees following irresponsible hedging decisions in 2008. In fact, I reduced that burden that was imposed on the population when I became Minister of Finance in 2010 by reducing the levy to 1.1 rupee 50 for mogas and 1 rupee for gas oil. Mr. Speaker, sir, we continue to ensure that basic necessities are offered at an affordable price. In this respect, government has maintained the price of the scheduled bread, that is the pain maison, to 2 rupees 60. Mr. Speaker, sir, coming again to the assertion of the Leader of the Opposition as to the alleged inaction of government with regard to price increases, I wish to state that as a result of a consultation with importers and the MCCI, the following measures have been taken and are underway. The current price of and subsidy on food items under control is being reviewed to further protect consumers. The markup on a number of medicines in Mauritius is being reviewed downwards in order to allow these medicines to be affordable to the public. A ministerial committee has been set up to look into additional measures to further support the population, and the subsidies being increased on a long grain white rice and flour to maintain them at their current price in spite of the massive increase in their prices worldwide. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the Opposition and Honourable Béranger have both argued that democracy is in decline because of the supposed postponement of municipal elections. First of all, let me make it clear that government has extended the life of the municipal councils in order to protect the health of the population from any possible flare-up of the COVID-19. The elections may be conducted at any time within the extended period, should the COVID-19 situation so allow, of course. Mr. Speaker, sir, I hasten to add that the COVID-19 situation in Mauritius is still under control, and this has been achieved thanks to the enlightened guidance of the high-level committee, the exceptional efforts and collaboration of our health authorities, our health workers, and our other frontliners, and also the collaboration, the sacrifice, the discipline of the population in general. However, as we all know, we are not out of the woods yet insofar as the COVID-19 is concerned, as we are still recording cases of local transmission, although the figure has gone down quite a lot. There is therefore a need for all of us and for the government above all to remain vigilant and continue to exercise great care and caution in the management of the COVID-19 crisis. This is the reason why government has maintained the quarantine period along with certain restriction measures. Mr. Speaker, sir, I heard the leader of the opposition saying that the sanitary restriction should now be removed. For the information of the House, and particularly for him, I would like to quote here the Director General of the World Health Organization, who, in his opening remarks on Member State Information Session on COVID-19, stated on 14th April 2022, I quote, "We are pleased to see a downward trend, but the pandemic is still far from over. Transmissions remains very high, and the relaxation of many public health and social measures is allowing continued transmission with the risk of new variants emerging." This week, the COVID-19 IRH Emergency Committee met and unanimously agreed that the pandemic remains a public health emergency. I appreciate their advice and agree that far from being the time to drop our guard, this is the moment to work even harder to save lives. This virus has over time become more transmissible and it remains deadly, unquote. Yesterday, at the second Global COVID-19 Summit, the Director General of the World Health Organization again reminded world leaders that, and I quote, "Although reported cases and deaths are now decreasing globally, it is misguided to think this pandemic is over. The pandemic is not over anywhere until it is over everywhere. In fact, cases are increasing in more than 70 countries. At the same time, testing rates globally are plummeting, making us blind to the evolution of the virus," unquote. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also apposite for me to mention here what had been reported by the WHO for the epidemiological week spanning from the 4th to the 10th of April 2022. The report said that there had been a twofold increase in the COVID-19 cases in 7 countries, with 32 countries registering more new cases. These had been attributed to the premature lifting off of public health and social measures, and possibly due to the circulation of the XE recombinant variant of Omicron, which is 10 times more contagious than the BA2 lineage of the Omicron variant. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also remind that postponement of municipal council elections in Mauritius is not something new. As a matter of fact, the Local Government Act has been amended or repealed and replaced by a new one by different governments on not less than 5 occasions to either postpone or prepone the municipal city council and municipal town council elections, namely in 2005, 2010, 2011, 2015, and 2021. It may also be apposite for me to remind here of the amendments brought to the Constitution in 1969 by the then Labour-led government to extend the life of the Parliament elected in August 1967. And there was no pandemic at that time. We all know that the move was part of a coalition deal with the PMSD of late Sir Gaëtan Duval, a deal which also comprised an increase in the number of ministers from 15 to 21 to accommodate elected members of the PMSD. And few years later, in 1973, the then Labour PMSD-led government also abolished by-elections in Mauritius. It was only in 1982 that the incoming government, led by late Sir Jugnauth, introduced necessary constitutional amendments to inter alia restore by-elections and limit the life of Parliament to 5 years. And it is the same Labour Party and PMSD which today are talking about decline of democracy. What an irony. Mr. Speaker, sir, according to international IDEA, and from February 2020 to February 2022, at least 80 countries and territories across the globe have decided to postpone national and local elections due to COVID-19, out of which at least 42 countries and territories have decided to postpone national elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will recall that the Rodrigues Regional Assembly elections were initially scheduled for 13th of February 2022. And at that time, the time of announcement of these elections, Rodrigues was COVID-19 free. However, a first case of COVID-19 in the local community in Rodrigues was detected on 26th of January 2022. There was subsequently a sharp rise in the number of daily local cases detected. The elections were consequently postponed to 27 of February 2022. But it is a fact that many electors who were contaminated with COVID-19 could not exercise their voting rights. Nevertheless, thanks to the prompt and effective response of central government, our health authorities and the Rodrigues Regional Assembly, we managed to contain the further spread of the virus on the island. Mr. Speaker, sir, it should also be brought out that the number of registered electors for the Rodrigues Regional Assembly election in 2021 was 31,450, while the total number of registered electors for the municipal councils elections in Mauritius is 387,051. And in case the municipal council elections were to be held in June 2022, the risk of further spread of the virus would therefore be much higher, and taking containment measures would be much more difficult and obviously more costly. Many electors and even possibly candidates could have been infected and consequently unable to exercise their rights and take part in the elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the 2020 village council elections, I must say that at the time of the elections were held, that is on 22nd November 2020, Mauritius was COVID-19 safe with no cases in the local community. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition has argued that elections have been held recently in other countries like France, England, and India, despite the prevalence of COVID-19 in these countries. And therefore, municipal council elections in Mauritius can and should be held after the budgetary exercise. I believe that we should compare like with like. The countries that have been mentioned are endowed with massive resources, and they have enormous capacity for resilience as compared to Mauritius, which remains highly vulnerable to such shocks. We cannot take such risks, especially at this particular juncture, where we are investing massively in our economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also reassure the House that the extension of the life of the municipal councils will neither undermine the rights of our city and town dwellers, nor our democratic processes. Government will continue to provide all the necessary resources to the municipal councils for them to continue to discharge their mandate in an effective manner and to ensure the well-being of the city and town dwellers. Moreover, councillors in post will continue to be held accountable for the management of the business of their councils. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are all aware that the international context remains very difficult and unpredictable. Along with the rest of the world, Mauritius also is facing tough challenges, and the road ahead is hazy. It is therefore essential for us as a nation to get our priorities right. There is no time for demagogy. We need to rise above partisan politics when it comes to the health of our population and our national safety and security. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the Opposition and Honorable Mohammed brandished the report of the Director of Audit and the report of the Public Accounts Committee to support their arguments in favor of the motion. As I stated in my reply to Parliamentary Question B213 on 12th of April last, the Director of Audit and the Public Accounts Committee have, in all their previous reports to all governments, made criticisms on the management of public funds and also made recommendations. This is certainly not something new. And may I remind the Leader of the Opposition of a few observations made by the Director of Audit in his report. During the years the Leader of the Opposition was holding the portfolio of Minister of Finance, that is between 2011 to 2014. In his 2011 report, the Director of Audit reported that the extension of completion time to contractors had resulted in an additional cost of 1.16 billion rupees by the Wastewater Management Authority. In the following year, in 2012, the Director of Audit made the following criticisms, amongst others: wastage of public funds, an additional cost of 864 million rupees for the Plen Williams sewage project by the Ministry of Public Utilities, delay and non-completion of 127 projects which had started in 2010 at a cost of 900 million rupees, overpayment of pensions, 58 million rupees. In 2014, the Director of Audit drew attention to an irrecoverable arrears of 4.8 billion rupees by the Mauritius Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, sir, we in the opposition at that time, we neither called for the government to step down, nor did we table any motion of no confidence. And I think what is important is that we accept criticisms when they are justified, of course, and we try to take corrective measures so as to improve over time our public sector financial management and accountability framework. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Béranger spoke about crise démocratique and the need for electoral reform. Well, let me remind him and members of the opposition that in December 2018, the government did introduce the Constitution Amendment Bill, which aimed precisely at reforming our electoral system by introducing a dose of proportional representation, making provision for better women representation, and more importantly, doing away with the mandatory declaration of community by prospective candidates at a general election. However, it is a matter of deep regret that the bill did not get the support of the then opposition for it to be passed by the National Assembly. Same happened. The financing of political party bill introduced by government in July 2019. The reasons that were put forward by the then opposition not to support the bill were, to say the least, frivolous. And now they have the cheek to speak of déficit démocratique. In fact, they should be speaking of déficit de crédibilité for themselves, as their thesis of élections truquées are falling apart, judgment after judgment in court. I was also proposing to dwell on that issue, but Honorable Ivan Kolenda-Bellew has remarkably, in fact, made a speech which really tells the situation, what has been the stand of the opposition since the beginning of this mandate. Out of 11 petitions that were lodged before the Supreme Court, 8 have been set aside with costs. Now the remaining 3. There's a judgment which is being awaited in the case where the petitioner is Mr. Suren Dayal against me and my 2 colleagues of constituency number 8. There is the petition in constituency number 10, which is coming for mention on the 17th of May, 2022. And there is another petition, constituency number 15, that will be heard in July 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me somehow make a passing remark with regard to the petition in constituency number 10, where it is clear that after those judgments of the Supreme Court, the petitioner is... Let me listen to what I'm saying before you say sub judice. Listen, you already conclude sub judice. I am not going to make any comment on the substance, on the merit of the case. What I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, after we have seen all those petitions that have been thrown out by the court, it is clear that there is a delaying tactic from the petitioner to drag the case further and further. This is what is happening. But in their despair, in the face of so many electoral petitions that they are losing in court, they even dared to attack the electoral commissioner, the office of the electoral commissioner, even the electoral supervisory commission, both independent bodies recognized internationally for their capacity to organize elections efficiently. What a shame, Mr. Speaker, sir. How low can they stoop? Mr. Speaker, sir, this government fully adheres to the tenets of democracy, such as the rule of law, protected rights and freedoms, as well as free and fair elections. I must remind that Mauritius regularly achieves very high scores in reliable studies that classify and rate the state of democracy in different countries. For example, in the EIU Democracy Index that was published by the Economist Intelligence Unit this year, Mauritius is listed as one of the 21 countries in the world classified as a full democracy. In fact, Mauritius is ranked 19th in this snapshot of the state of world democracy for 165 countries. Mauritius is considered as the only fully functional democracy in Africa on this list, which comprises 44 African countries. Significantly, Mauritius obtained a total score of 8.08 out of 10. 5 essential criteria have been taken into account for the ranking of Mauritius for full democracy, namely the electoral process and pluralism, the functioning of the government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. And it is noted that Mauritius scored 9.17 out of 10 for its electoral process. These prove again that democracy is in no way in jeopardy in Mauritius, as the opposition wants us to believe. Mr. Speaker, sir, with relation to the removal, let me come to this, the removal from Mauritius of the Slovak national, Mr. Piu. I and institutions of this country have been wrongly accused by some attention-seeking individuals of flouting an order of the Supreme Court. And that was nothing but a political plot against our motherland. And I proved the utter bad faith of the opposition and exposed the ill intent when I answered the PQ B325 on Tuesday's sitting. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me seize this opportunity to set the record straight in relation to a remark made by the Honorable Utim on Tuesday, 10th of May 2022. Following my reply to PQ B525, alleging that in the case of this Slovak national, the judge of the Supreme Court had ordered that the matter be referred to the DPP for prosecution. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is totally wrong. In fact, what the judge had ordered was that the matter be referred to the DPP for any action he deemed appropriate. What a shame for this honourable member to come in this House to misquote, misstate what a judge of the Supreme Court has said in his judgment. You should at least apologize for that. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me forcefully reiterate that this government will always uphold the rule of law. We believe that compliance with judicial decisions and court orders is a key element of good governance. We are aware that in their inconsiderate quest for power, some opposition politicians and agitators will stop at nothing to undermine the credibility of national institutions. They may even have recourse to extreme methods to achieve their ends. Monsieur le Président, certains membres de l'opposition en face ont osé défendre un trafiquant, un homme condamné en Slovaquie pour fabrication, possession, trafic de drogue. Ils se sont mis dans le camp d'un marchand de la drogue, d'un marchand de la mort. Ils ont soutenu un homme dangereux qui voulait contracter un mariage de convenance avec une Mauricienne pour se réfugier dans notre pays et faire son odieux business et mettre en péril la vie de nos enfants. Ils se rangent du côté de la mafia de la drogue. Leur masque tombe, Monsieur le Président. Et ils osent nous accuser. Cette opposition est indigne et suscite le mépris. Le peuple saura, j'en suis convaincu, juger ces membres de l'opposition en temps et lieu. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like now to refer again to the violent demonstrations that have taken place in several parts of the country on 22nd of April. There are numerous indications that a concerted attempt was made to disturb peace in the country. Police had to take some strong measures to quell violence caused by the aggressive protesters. Police restored law and order quickly and efficiently, but we had regretfully to deplore that during the clashes, 21 police officers and 1 firefighter sustained serious injuries, a fact which the leader of the opposition seemed to be unaware of or chose to obliterate in his speech. 2 other persons, unfortunately, were also injured. There were also considerable damages to infrastructure, which will have to be repaired at taxpayers' expense. But what is more serious, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the ensuing bad publicity for the country, especially for the tourism sector, at a time when the government is devoting so much efforts and resources to our economic recovery program. Monsieur le Président, de par leurs actes antipatriotiques, certains ont voulu saboter l'économie du pays et cela est impardonnable. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are fully alive to the risks that organized crime and political propagandists will try to wreak havoc whenever that serves their selfish interests. A responsible government cannot simply turn a blind eye when flags are signaling potential illegal activities of organized crime. We have to respond appropriately. It is our duty to do our utmost to guarantee security and law and order for Mauritian citizens and visitors. A zero-tolerance policy is being adopted. We shall stand firm and strong against those unpatriotic demolition experts and agitators, recklessly bent on creating havoc and at destabilizing the country and the population. Police will show no leniency towards those who are bent on creating disorder and anarchy in the country. Terror plots will be busted in the same way in which police just foiled a suspected attempt to carry out major blasts targeting state buildings. A well-coordinated operation conducted by several units of the police force led to the arrest of a 26-year-old suspect on 2nd of May in Rosebois, after a loaded firearm, bullets, and dynamite sticks, as well as pellets of heroin were found at his home. Police is investigating whether the suspect is part of a drug trafficking network which intended to commit terrorist acts across the country. And those people are being defended by whom, Mr. Speaker, sir? They are being defended by whom? Those people who form part of a group, they call themselves Avengers. They are Avengers, and the Avengers, there are people in the Avengers who are also part of l'Alliance de l'Espoir, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the kind of hope they have for the country. These are the people who together now, they are defending those drug traffickers, those who want to create instability in the country. We must understand that the fight against the immensely rich and powerful drug barons is not an easy battle. We know they are financing some politicians and agitators. But my government will spare no effort to track down the drug traffickers. We are also unflinchingly committed to fight any sort of mafia wherever they may be. Unlike the opposition, we shall never defend criminals or people engaged in illegal activities. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is fitting that I commend our police force for the tangible results that its efforts have yielded in that respect. Police had made record drug seizures, arrested several drug barons, and dismantled several drug rings in the past few years. Mr. Speaker, sir, some members of the opposition have referred to scandals, which according to them warrant a no-confidence vote. I must reiterate that I have been at all times consistent in my response to such allegations. I have said time and again that most of the allegations were unfounded and frivolous. Others were referred to the appropriate authorities for inquiry, and appropriate actions would be taken in the light of the findings. I also stated that whoever are found to be responsible would have to assume their responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also an opportunity for me to go down memory lane to demonstrate what my party, the MSM, has achieved for this country and its people. Because when I listened to Honorable Boulel's speech, it was not a support of motion of confidence against the government. It is like a motion of no confidence against the MSM party, against Pravind Jugnauth as leader of the MSM. I think he's got himself confused. So let me go down to memory lane. History, Honorable Boulel, if you can listen to what I'm going to say, is there to testify that in 1982, the Labour Party and the PMSD had turned the hope ensuing from independence into nightmare. Qui ne se rappelle pas de la situation de misère noire et de désespoir qui prévalait dans le pays après 14 ans d'indépendance? Le pays était à genoux, l'économie avait subi les contre-coups de deux dévaluations successives de la roupie. Il y avait plus de 80 000 chômeurs. Il y avait à peine des réserves pour 10 jours d'importation des denrées essentielles. Voilà, en bref, le bilan de la gestion du pays entre 1968 et 1982. History is also there to testify that, as from 1983, there was a new ray of hope and the country was steered by the then visionary and avant-garde Prime Minister, Sir Pravind Jugnauth, towards an economic miracle which the IMF and the World Bank cited as a stunning example of belief, vision, and achievements. From misery, Sir Pravind Jugnauth delivered prosperity. Le MSM à la tête du pays a fait démentir la prophétie de James Mead, qui avait prévu un avenir sombre pour Maurice après l'indépendance. Et il est bon de souligner que sans le développement économique que le pays a vécu dans les années 80, et en début 90, l'État-providence aurait bel et bien disparu. Now let me come to 2000, after the first 5 years of the reign of the Labour Party, under the leadership of Dr. Navin Ramgoolam. Again, they left a country and an economy which were at the doldrums. At that point in time, the best description of the socio-economic mess that prevailed was provided by Dr. Ramasitanen. He said, and I quote, "High spending, high taxing government," and I say that for Honorable Ramphul, because at that time, maybe he was having biberon. He was not yet in the Labour Party. Listen to what Dr. Sitanen said. High spending, high taxing government. En 5 ans, entre 1995 et 2000, le constat est que le gouvernement travailliste est friand d'augmentation de 100%. Ainsi, au cours de cette période, les dépenses publiques sont passées de 18 milliards à 36 milliards. Les recettes de taxes directes, indirectes ont augmenté de 11 milliards à 22 milliards. Et le servicing de la dette, servicing, you like to talk about servicing, de 3,6 milliards à 7,2 milliards. C'est de l'irresponsabilité. Nous avons battu le record de l'Argentine qui a doublé ses dépenses et sa dette publique en 10 ans. Unquote. These remarks are made towards your leader, your actual leader, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam. Et comment oublier le tristement célèbre Macarena Party d'Albion, qui était le symbole d'un régime qui puait l'indécence et l'immoralité. Venons-en maintenant au deuxième gouvernement de 2005 à 2009. Que retient-on? D'abord, que l'ancien Premier ministre et son ministre des Finances avaient fait miroiter des objectifs de croissance économique qui n'ont jamais été atteints. Deuxièmement, la population avait été saignée à blanc avec l'introduction de multiples taxes et une dépréciation massive de plus de 20% de la roupie qui avait fait flamber les prix et affecter le pouvoir d'achat. J'en ai fait mention auparavant dans mon intervention. L'histoire, Monsieur le Président, a aussi retenu que j'ai démontré dans le budget de 2010 qu'il y avait bel et bien d'autres alternatives, sans alourdir le fardeau fiscal de la population. J'avais mis de côté toutes les mesures de Ramgoolam et Sitanen qui avaient asphyxié le peuple. Je me suis mis aux côtés du peuple et le MSM, fort de ses convictions socialistes, a quitté le gouvernement en juillet 2011 sur fond de divergence sur plusieurs dossiers. En 2011 et 2014, l'économie s'est retrouvée encore une fois entre les mains d'un gouvernement incompétent qui avait augmenté la dette publique de 177,8 milliards de roupies à 237,7 milliards de roupies, une augmentation de 33,7%, soit à 60,6% du PIB. Le taux de chômage avait grimpé à 8%, mais pire encore, une crise de confiance avait paralysé le pays. La République de Maurice était à genoux une nouvelle fois. Suivant une étude auprès des chefs d'entreprise en 2012, la situation économique et la crise de confiance qui prévalait étaient décrites par la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie comme suit. Et je cite, « Que ce soit la perception des entrepreneurs sur la situation économique et celle de leurs entreprises, le niveau des commandes fermes, l'évolution des affaires et les perspectives d'embauche, les opinions sont négatives. » Fin de citation. En juillet 2013, une autre étude de la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie concluait que la perception était encore plus négative, que le pays était dans une période de continued uncertainty. Et pendant que le peuple et l'économie subissaient, la sirène et son séducteur prenaient le pays en otage et s'amusaient sur le dos du peuple dans un élan d'immoralité et de népotisme devenu infernal. Qui ne se souvient pas des frasques de la sirène à l'aéroport et à Roche-Noire, entre autres, sans oublier l'épisode de Toussali? Qui ne se souvient pas des contrats mirobolants décrochés par Airway Coffee de la sirène dans l'enceinte aéroportuaire? Le peuple sait qui sont ceux au pouvoir qui ont toujours ruiné le pays, mis la population dans une situation de vulnérabilité et d'hypothéquer l'avenir de la nation. Ces mêmes individus, ces amoureux d'hédonisme, qui ont tout le temps abusé le pouvoir et mis le pays à genoux, osent aujourd'hui nous pointer du doigt. Nous n'avons absolument aucune leçon à prendre de ces irresponsables. À chaque fois que le pays a fait appel au MSM dans des situations pénibles, nous avons répondu présent et redressé la barre. Le peuple le sait et nous fait confiance. C'est ce qui importe le plus pour nous. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de revenir sur cette année sombre de notre pays en ce qui concerne la démocratie parlementaire. L'année où le Premier ministre d'alors et le leader de l'opposition d'alors, en complicité, ferment l'Assemblée nationale pendant 9 mois pour négocier une alliance qu'on appelait auparavant, le prélude de l'alliance s'appelait le on and off, selon leur convenance, sur le dos du peuple. Aujourd'hui aussi, c'est un peu le on and off. Mais c'est un peu différent ce on and off aujourd'hui. Le leader de l'opposition s'était accroché à son siège et de par son acte, il avait provoqué un dysfonctionnement de notre système parlementaire en empêchant le président de la République de nommer un autre leader de l'opposition. Et ces politiciens osent nous accuser de tuer la démocratie. Monsieur le Président, le peuple n'est pas dupe. Les vrais patriotes, les vrais démocrates sont de ce côté de la Chambre. Même pendant la période où le Covid-19 atteignait ses pointes à Maurice, ce gouvernement a pris les dispositions pour que l'Assemblée nationale continue de siéger. Et si devant leur petit écran, les Mauriciens peuvent suivre les débats parlementaires en direct, c'est grâce au gouvernement mené par le MSM. C'est cela l'œuvre des démocrates que nous sommes. Monsieur le Président, la motion du leader de l'opposition sera rejetée, pas seulement par cette Chambre, mais également par la grande majorité de nos compatriotes. Laissons alors les prétendus donneurs de leçons et faux sauveurs à leur sale besogne. Le pays saura les juger une nouvelle fois, le moment venu. Mr. Speaker, sir, fake and bogie Democrats will continue with their fake news, their misinformation and disinformation campaign, their deliberate distortion and misrepresentation of facts and figures, and with their vain attempts to influence and slant public opinion their own narrow and cheap way. In fact, they have not been, they are not, and shall never be at the heart's ease to see, and they cannot bear to see a non-stop caring and genuinely patriotic and socialism-inspired government in action, not only to protect the country and the population in the face of health and economic hazards, but also to ensure resilience and momentous bouncing back to safety and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is written, and I quote, that a motion of no confidence, also called motion of non-confidence, is a parliamentary motion traditionally put before a parliament by the opposition in the hope of defeating or embarrassing a government, unquote. In our case, the question of defeating the government, which holds an overall and comfortable majority, does not arise. Nor does the question of embarrassing the government arise. On the contrary, as I abundantly stated and illustrated in my reply to PNQ of the Leader of the Opposition on Tuesday, 26th of April of this year, government has not been insensitive to the grievances of the population. On the contrary, in fact, and in real terms, no government before 2014 had done so much and concretely to fight poverty and improve the standard of living of the population, particularly the most vulnerable. And I must re-emphasize that the guiding principles of our actions have firmly remained fairness, equity, and inclusiveness. We in government convincingly and continuously place a premium on the common sense and value judgment of the vast majority of our sensible population, while the opposition has at all times since 2015 been trying to poison the minds of some people to stir instability in the country. And this is what the opposition has been attempting to do, again through the present motion of no confidence. Mr. Speaker, sir, ironically, A motion of no confidence in the opposition itself is called for, as the motley of opposition has so often been the subject of adverse media comments, particularly in anti-government media frustrated by the prevarication, internal strife, personal animosity and aversion, overweening personal ambition and ulterior and sinister motives of their political friends and idols in the opposition. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me say one thing in reply to what Honorable Bulel said. He was talking earlier about he was talking about the way we function as a party and so on, and he was criticizing. I think you have, if I can refresh your memory, Honorable Bulel, as a person who has been in the Labour Party, I think since you joined the Labour Party, you call yourself to be the one who is the most eligible in the Labour Party with Labour blood in your veins. If you can recall that you have been bolted out of the executive committee of the Labour Party at the Rosemont Square when you were not allowed entrance. And what did you say? What did you say? You'd say this is the Labour Party where you have thugs, you have bouncers preventing you from getting in. But we know what Dr. Navin Ramulam thinks of you. I think he's been saying it. You are like an is no good. You know, is no good. Trying by all means to try to get this seat, but unfortunately you are not able to. So I wish you good luck, though. As a member of this House, I wish you good luck and hope that you are able to reach to achieve your objective. Let me conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me again appeal to all our citizens to display their sense of responsibility and to guard themselves against the demagogues bent on poisoning their minds and utilizing them as their tools of destruction. Let us continue to join hands and work together to meet the challenges we are faced with and continue to build the better Mauritius we all dream of. Mr. Speaker, sir, we on this side of the House, we have a clear mandate from the people. We have a clear vision for the future of our country, a vision devoid of potted thinking, a vision, to use the words of Rabindranath Tagore, not lost in the dreary desert sand of dead habit, a habit which regrettably and on the whole characterizes the opposition. We believe in movement forward for our country, while the opposition strives for movement backward. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are doing what we believe is right and in the best interests of the country and our population. We are determined to forge forward and to navigate the treacherous period ahead together and continue our journey towards building a better and brighter future for all, with particular attention to the most vulnerable section of our population. This has been our guiding philosophy all along, and we are going to stick to it come what may. This government has the will and the determination to face the current and upcoming challenges, and we will succeed once again by focusing on the strength of our people and our society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, I'll suspend the sitting for 1.5 hours.